Necrosmith 2 is an action roguelike with strategy elements that releases today, March 27th, 2024, on the PC, specifically Steam. It costs $7.99 with a 15% launch discount and has you reanimating corpses by putting them together piece by piece to take over the different Discworlds that you come across, despite the fact that they aren't on the back of a turtle. With a couple of new features and a procedurally generated world to play in, can this game win a place in your library? Or will its ability to reanimate push it right back into the grave that it was resurrected from? Let's find out. But before I begin, this key was obtained from the developer for review purposes. That won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? For this review, I'm going to show you a sample run of the game. This is about 5 to 6 hours into the game after getting some upgrades and understanding the game a little bit from a basic standpoint. I did play the first Necrosmith, and there are some improvements, but in general, there's a lot of what you could expect from the first game. Alright, every game begins with a procedurally generated map, and specifically, you starting with your tower. If the tower goes down, you lose, and you have to protect it by summoning creatures. And the creatures are made through body parts that you find in the world. Now, you start off with a couple, basically skeletons, and you have to piece them together with one head piece, one body piece, 2 hands, and 2 legs. Each body part adds stats to the creature. Some of them are basic, like health. For example, this orc skeleton body will add 105 health to the overall creature. Some of them are specific to the body part in question. Your attacks are going to come from your hands, for example, while your view distance is usually going to come from your head because, you know, eyes. At the start of each run, you'll get enough body parts to create 2 skeletons, which basically are the lowest level creature in this game. They're going to be able to get you started, but aren't something that you're going to want to rely on, especially as you get into the second and third Discworld of this game, because they're basically fodder. And as you can see here, they start exploring the world. In terms of controlling the creatures, you give them basic commands of what they should be doing in the overall picture. Both of them right now are in gathering mode. They're basically going to walk around, try to get as many resources as possible in order for me to build more things or create new creatures. You have 5 different commands that you can give them, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Now, the skeletons aren't good, and so what I'm going to do is try to build a much better creature. Now, in order to summon creatures, you're going to have to use mana, and each of the body parts cost a specific mana in order for you to resurrect. So right now, I've got 30 mana, and it's going to take about 150 mana in order to revive it. Yeah, I'm going to need a lot, and I can sell other body parts and convert them into mana, but you can see the issue here. The fact is, I'm going to have to manage my resources in order to be able to summon something a little bit more hefty. And so I'll walk around. Oh, there we go, 155. And I'll release it to the tower, which is the only place that I can release it right now. Now, I'm going to immediately take control of him because of the fact that, well, these guys, the skeletons, they're slow and very fragile. You'll notice the stats here, 25 defense, 7 attack. Meh, you know, nothing really to write home about. But yeah, he's got 2,000 defense and also is got about 1,200 in attack. A lot better than the 2 skeletons, but the downside is he's a little slow. So I don't necessarily want to explore with him. And that's the thing. All the body parts you have those stats, and you're going to want to create creatures that are beneficial to what you're looking at right now. There are terrain types in this game, and each of them may be able to deal with a specific terrain type better than the others. And so you're going to want to mix and match what pieces that you get and create creatures that benefit what you need right now or in the near future. One of my frustrations with the game, which some may consider a strength in retrospect, is the fact that the procedurally generated biomes and the world that it constructs can give you vastly different part quality in the biomes that you look at. The terrain that you're on right now will determine what kind of parts that you get. So right now, I've been getting orc parts that have been burning for mana. And in the overall picture, orc parts for the second Discworld just aren't worth my time in terms of creating creatures with them. They'll have other uses later on, but I'd rather just burn them for mana and create creatures that are a little bit more heftier and can actually do some significant damage. Like this sort of weird creature that I created here that was able to throw boulders. The core system at Necrosmith and Necrosmith 2 in terms of the creature creation, to me, is very much a double-edged sword. It is very interesting to mess around with the different creature types, what they're able to do, and try to, create super creatures or create specifically designed creatures to do a task. But in the early game, I want speed. I want the ability to explore the map, to get that crypt, for example, which gets me more skeleton parts, and just gather resources in order to build more things. And if I don't get a procedurally generated world that really gives me something like the Harpy or, something with a bit of speed, tough shit. But on the other hand, that's sort of the charm here. The fact is, you're not always going to get the resources that you want, so you have to adjust. Maybe I'd become more of a slow explorer, but really buff up my creatures and really focus on using the defense command to defend an area as opposed to just defending the tower. So I strategically take over parts of the map. But you're always sort of wondering what the RNG gods are going to give you this time. That 200 health building right now, if I were to attack it, it would give me an upgrade for the tower. But again, it's random. It could be something like body parts of types that I don't need right now or don't want. Or it could just be healing the tower over time. Speaking of the tower, it's about to be attacked right now because I only got 2 people defending it. And because they come from all different areas, sometimes you're going to have to defend it yourself. Thankfully, you have spells. So, for example, this lightning bolt, right here. Yep, just takes out a bunch of creatures. Granted, those are low-level creatures, and over time, you won't be able to take them out with a lightning bolt. But I do like the spell system because it gives you at least a little bit of control that is consistent from run to run. Granted, you have to unlock the spells by paying coins, which are earned from doing runs of the game. It's an overall upgrade system, very similar to something like Vampire Survivors in unlocking new characters. Now, in terms of constructing creatures, you want to adapt yourself to what you need right now. I just built this harpy head and other body parts, and look how fast it's going. It's what I want. I wanted something with speed. But other times, you want to be a little bit more strategic with what you're building, because you can put a bunch of body parts together, and sure, they may work. But to get the most bang for your buck, you'll probably want to use some recipe creatures. Recipes are created when you put specific body parts together in combination, usually ones that have synergy with each other. There are basic ones. Things like the Harpy Princess here are all basic Harpy parts with a specific head. Okay, that makes sense. But others are a little bit more out there. Mixing and matching. Maybe it's a Harpy and its legs, but its wings are dragon wings. And they usually give a significant buff in terms of the creature that would be made at its base, whether it be attack, adding new stats like, speed and armor, but maybe it'll give vampirism, which will give health back to the creature. Now, finding these recipes, there's probably going to be a guide for getting all the recipes when the game comes out, but if you're using logic, some of them make sense. You see that lizard head with the armor in the top left there? Well, you'll notice that the arm to the left there also has armor that's of a similar nature. Maybe I combine parts of that style all in each of the slots. The game never explicitly told me that, but it was something that I was able to get from the information in hand, and I was rewarded for it, which I appreciate. Now, if you played the original Necrosmith, you may wonder what's different about this game. Besides the procedural generation, for example, you have Titans. Creatures that you create are small and are made of, 6 body parts overall. Titans are built a little bit bigger. In this case, the skeleton guy I'm creating is made of 35 bone creature parts. So those skeleton parts that I said were useless before, no, they're useful. They're useful for building the Titans and being used as fodder for them. Titans are going to be the big linchpin in your strategy, whether it be defending your tower or taking out, the places where creatures are spawning. I could try to take out that 5,325 house with this guy here, but it's going to take a while, and he's going to be put into danger because, well, you can see all the bullets on screen. I'm not going to be able to run by that. And so the Titans are going to be able to do a bit more for you, but you only start with 1. Granted, I was able to unlock up to 2 by the time I was able to do this review, but I felt like the Titans needed something a little bit more than just more health or more attack. They have unique abilities in the parts that you collect in terms of their attacks, but that's very similar to what body parts you select to create the creatures. They needed something like a special attack unique to them that made them stand out. They just felt like a limited element that, yeah, sure, it was cool to create a Titan and absolutely necessary, but it just felt like a bigger creature I was creating and nothing more. At specific times in this review, I will fast forward the run just because either something's not interesting or it's just repetitive footage. But I do want to sort of get back to the controlling of creatures. Now, I understand from a balance standpoint in what was constructed here, the developers did not want to give you that much control over each creature. So when I tell a creature to go and actually explore and collect, I can't specifically tell it, go collect, in the swamp area. Go collect at the, ice area. No, I have to either move the creature over to that area and then tell it to collect, or just let it do what it wants. And sometimes it may not make a good decision because, well, that sort of makes sense. You've, brought this creature back from the dead. You may not necessarily have full control over it when it's going off and doing its thing. But with that said, when I want more precise control, there could be things that would make that a little bit easier. So you see those 6 creatures that I have at the bottom there. You would hope that I could select that maybe through number keys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Granted, there's more than 10 on there, but you know what I mean. You can't. You gotta use your mouse. And that feels like a wasted opportunity, especially with players who like these types of games, love that type of control, especially for people who are coming from tower defense or strategy, where that's something, hotkeys are a huge thing. It feels like the game missed an opportunity with that. Granted, I think you can do it with the commands, but even then, you can't necessarily change those commands. You don't have bindable keys, which, again, for a PC-only game, feels like it's missing an element there, especially when this is the second game in the series. In terms of the presentation, I do like the presentation for the type of game that they put here. Granted, it is not graphically intense or necessarily the greatest in terms of the sort of isometric view here, but the information that you need, especially the body parts, are very easily distinguishable. You can tell one piece from the next, and it does have a good style to it that is consistent throughout the game. Now, I did want to see a little bit more detail in the biomes in particular, and sometimes the game makes a decision that somewhat makes sense. The one hotkey that you'll use constantly is the spacebar to pause time, very similar to RTSs or any game like that. And you'll notice the screen has a circle around it with snowflakes. You froze time. Okay, cute, but in a game where you have creatures with fire effects, creatures that are fire elementals, earth elementals, I just felt like maybe a better effect could be used, like, a paused stopwatch or something like that to indicate that information, especially because you'll notice that I unpaused there and there was a blue effect around the screen still. That confused me at times. Granted, there was no snowflakes there, but if I get into the ice biome, I think that's part of the information that it's telling you that, hey, there was, some frozen effects. Certain creatures are going to be affected like this. At least I think that's the case. I sometimes can't tell the information that the game's giving me is what I think it is. I will also say this, when summoning those special creatures, as I mentioned before, the first time you do it when you don't know the recipe, it becomes obvious because the screen pops up something saying, oh, you discover this recipe. But when you do it the second time, I'd still wish that the game gave me an indication that you summon that specific one. If you did it through the recipe sort of menu, yeah, okay, but as you learn and understand the game, you can do it without going into the recipe menu, and sometimes I wish the game would give me an indication that, yep, this one's a little bit special in some specific way. Now, a good amount of people who are coming to this review probably played the original Necrosmith, or are subscribers to this channel. You can hit that subscribe button if you aren't. But those people who are coming from the original game, what's funny is that I find that maybe a harder sell than to players that are new to the Necrosmith series of 2 games. The thing is that if you didn't play Necrosmith 1, I can recommend Necrosmith 2 to you right now. I enjoy the game with my problems with it aside. The fact is that it's got more features, it's got the procedural generation that will have a bit more replay value, and it is a good price for the game. But those who played the original Necrosmith, what was added here, I feel like the game could have gone in a lot of different directions. Specifically, the Titans that I mentioned, the biomes and islands for the generated world. So as you can see, you've got like dark portions, you got, the ice portions, the swamp portions, and each part deals with those biomes differently. Okay, good, reasonable. And then flying undead. Like, okay, you can fly over terrain and, past that. It's just that when I think about the possibilities of what could have been upgraded from the first Necrosmith, I feel like a lot of the different ones I can come up with off the top of my head would have been more significant. Things like, traps or specific areas that your creatures have to deal with, whether it be like breaking down a wall in order to get into an area, or, has to deal with lava pits, which actually deal damage over time as opposed to the speed. Or things like finding special parts. Like, for example, maybe I come across a head of a famous warrior, and that warrior has some element that makes them unique. Maybe a unique ability, or, stats that are increased that makes it stand out, so that you maybe want to focus on that creature in that specific run. There were a lot of different ways they could have gone, and I understand. Don't get me wrong. I am a software developer. I understand that adding those features, it takes time, it takes money, it takes effort. I just feel like in terms of what was added, more focus could have been put on new features like that rather than some of the ones that were chosen. As for the music and sound, the music, I'm going to be honest with you, there's nothing against the music in this game. It's fine. It does the job of being background noise, but if you are playing on the PC, 99% of people are going to put on a YouTube video or other music for the game as opposed to the music in this game. It doesn't add anything significant to the game in terms of tension or any sort of feeling, and quite frankly, I didn't notice it when I turned it off for my review portion. As for the sound does the job for the most part. You get indicators that you need, like, okay, I built something. You get the hammer and the saw there to indicate you built a building, and sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. You're hearing the squishingness, right? Here, the thing is that that's creatures, I think, dying, and sometimes you're trying to put the sound with what's going on screen. Creatures are dying off screen. At least I think that's the case. And sometimes the sound doesn't make sense. Sometimes it truly does. You hear fireballs going off. You hear what you would expect a fireball to sound like. But I don't know. It's very inconsistent. I'm going to stay silent for a good 20-30 seconds here, and maybe you'll get an idea of exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I'm 20 minutes into this review, and I didn't specifically say if I enjoyed my time with the game. I did. Don't get me wrong, I have a lot of criticisms about the game, but the base gameplay and strategy is here and enjoyable, just like it was in Necrosmith 1. And I did appreciate especially the first several hours of the game in terms of the overall experience. You'll note that I specifically said the first several hours, because one of the problems with the game, and its biggest problem as of right now, at the time of publishing this video, in my opinion, is its difficulty curve. Specifically, the second world, the second disc. Before I go any further in this review, I do want to make a note here. The game came with a review guide, and a review guide that gave me information. Not necessarily how to play the game, but gave me information about the game and what was happening with it. What was different from the first game, its length, which is about 8 to 12 hours, what languages it had, but in particular, it also had known bugs and issues in the pre-launch build. Now, some of them were specific bugs like added more sounds, music to the final slides of the game, an issue with achievements, but in particular, there's one that stood out to me, and it had to do with the balance of the second disc. Now, it also says the balance of the third disc wasn't balanced properly yet, but the balance of the second disc stood out because it said it was fixed. Yeah, about that. See, one of my big frustrations with the game is that you'll notice the timer at the top there. That timer indicates when a big enemy is going to spawn. And that big enemy, you're going to need to prepare for. You'll notice that most of my creatures are at the tower because I'm defending my heart. And because of that, I need to get the biggest creatures that I can, or, you know, the ones that can defend my tower properly. Granted, that won't win me the game. I have to find a specific building to destroy it in order to win this disc. But I know I'm not going to be able to do it in the time in question. Now, I will note that in the first world, the big boss of that world was still a problem. I did fail my first 2 or 3 runs in that area, but the boss there, yeah, it did some damage, and I was able to defeat it once or twice, and then lost on the second go around, or was just running out of resources. But the second biome, you'll notice that my tower is pretty healthy. It's 10,000 to start with, and it's at 9,824. I could heal it with the heal spell, by the way, but that's a story for another day. But imagine my frustration when all the work that I had gone, especially in the first couple of runs of this second world, that it all would fall apart once that timer hit. Now, you may think, oh, well, then you can get those permanent upgrades and, you know, get new spells and upgrade other things, or, you know, adjust your strategy. This is about, I want to say, the 9th or 10th run I've tried of the second go-around. I want to say that. I may have restarted at a couple of them because, again, one of the things that I don't like about the game is that there's no save option. You can't exit and come back to it. But I tried it several times. And you'd think that maybe I would make a little bit of progress in terms of the second world. You know, maybe the boss gets down to a half health, or a third health, or a fourth health. No, not at all. I made progress. Barely any progress. In fact, let me fast forward here. All right, I fast forward to about 30 seconds left. I have 2 titans. I've got reasonable creatures of a reasonable size. Not everything that I wanted in terms of defense and everything, but none of these creatures are pushovers. They're all going to be able to defend, especially against the horde of creatures that are coming otherwise. But Will that make a difference for the big boss? Well, we got about, I want to say 20, 30 seconds as I build a creature here at the end to find out. Okay, well, I didn't really want a harpy head for this, but, you know, when in Rome, you build with what you have. And yeah, that's a horrible looking creature, but it's going to try to defend as all the other ones do. All right, we got this Pope Death creature here. They've got a huge ice thing. I'm going to take control and try to defend my tower as best as I can. I know that that meteor shower is not really doing much against it. And I'll hit it with a lightning bolt. Oh, that didn't really do any damage on it, huh? All right, well, hopefully my creatures can, you know, take control. I'm going to take control of this one, and it's going to hit. Oh, by the way, let's just watch him take down the tower. You know how that it's been standing for the last 20 minutes? Yeah, it went down in 20 seconds from the boss. You can see my frustration here, especially after upgrading these things here. These are upgrades that I have bought, like the cat and the, you know, 2 titans in question. That's after several attempts. That's the big problem with this game right now, because when it comes to the experience, it gets to a point of frustration. It feels like that second boss in particular is horribly balanced to extend the gameplay time of the game, at least in my opinion. Again, I want to be very clear. They indicated that they made a bunch of fixes, and I am working with a press copy. Granted, that footage that you saw was the day before the game comes out. I actually played it literally earlier in the day in order to make this video on it. But until I can see that the balance is there, that's a hard sell for me in terms of the game, because playing the game over and over again, because of the repetitious nature of the game, you're always starting with the skeletons. You're always starting with a procedurally generated world that changes, but the body parts don't necessarily change that much from run to run. You still have general strategies. You know, start with speed, get as many resources as possible, and try to make those special creatures. And when it comes to the enjoyment factor, the first couple of hours is great, but when you're throwing yourself at the wall over and over again and not seemingly making progress, it sucks. Especially because the upgrades for the permanent upgrades are significant in terms of value. The 2 titans, for example, you start with the 1 titan, and to get the 2nd titan, you need 5,000 coins. I want to say that a typical run in terms of getting the 2nd biome and getting through 1 boss version of it to get to the boss and then he kills you is about 1,000 to 1,500 coins. So even the Titan didn't make a difference, and let alone all the other upgrades that I got that helped me. Which makes me trying to score this game, again, I haven't beaten the game. This is a review of what I've played, and I have played about, 8 to 10 hours at this point. It says I played 36 hours, but I've left the game overnight. It could be 12 hours, 15 hours, I'm not exactly sure, but to be on the safe side, I want to say 8 to 10 hours. Now, is it possible that I just didn't play the game right? That the joke about game reviewers being bad at games is applying here? It's possible. Maybe I just didn't get the information that the game was giving me in terms of clues. Maybe I just didn't vibe with the game in general, and I just tried to stubbornly use strategies, even though I tried a variety of them that didn't work. And maybe I just am showing my age. But I do have experience with a ton of different games of all difficulties. Easy, difficult, hard, whatever you want to call them. And I do have a sense for a game's balance in terms of what the player can expect. And here, the balance felt off. The balance felt like it was adjusted so that the player would get more play time out of the game rather than a appropriate balance for the skill that was being done, especially when you hit that second world. First world, reasonable. Fail it once, fail twice, get a little bit further and further as you understand the mechanics. Granted, coming from Necrosmith 1, I understood a couple of them, but yeah, felt appropriate. But then it just fell off a cliff. And that's what makes scoring Necrosmith 2 hard. Again, I didn't beat the game. Let's get that out there right now. I put significant time into it, but I did not beat it. And the game has strengths. From a strategy standpoint, it does have good randomization elements in terms of, adjusting on the fly. It has frustrations with missing hotkeys, in my opinion, and again, the RNG coming into play. But its unique element does stand out. There's not a lot of games that let you construct your creatures and let them go wild, and so Necrosmith is worth playing. I see strategy players doing well here and appreciating the different take on the genre, but those outside of a regular strategy player maybe were taken in by the creation of creatures, they may get frustrated. The game doesn't help you as much as I think it should, and quite frankly, there are times where the game screws you by spawning, huge enemies at the start that your tower can't deal with right away. And that's when the RNG can feel like it's stabbing you in the back. It definitely falls into my scoring system in the niche game category. Those strategy players are going to want to look at it and maybe consider buying it right away if they really need their fix and don't have anything else to play right now. But those outside of the regular genre players, there may be other games you want to focus on first, and in particular, the game isn't necessarily friendly to new players of the genre in terms of tutorials or anything like that. It's fun, but it's also insanely frustrating. And that's why it gets a 71 out of 100. It's a niche buy, especially for players who love the strategy genre, but many others will want to wait for a sale. But that does not take into account my enhancer system, which takes the more subjective elements of games and tries to match a game to you. If you fall into one of the following categories on screen, add or subtract that score to the main score. If the first digit of your score changes, refer to this chart to see if the game lies in the buyability rating for you. Anyway, that's it for this review. If you've made it this far into the review, first of all, thank you. But I do have to ask what you think of this more rambling review format. I did ask that on Berserk Boy, and while it may not necessarily have matched Berserk Boy in terms of the genre in question, the rambling review for a strategy game in particular makes a lot more sense because, a lot of edits on a strategy game doesn't make a lot of sense, at least in my opinion, because you want to see the moment-of-moment progression in terms of, what you're upgrading, what the mechanics are, and jumping back and forth between footage doesn't make a lot of sense, at least in my opinion. But I want to get your feedback, so leave it in the comment section below. As to what's coming up on the channel in terms of reviews, I am going to still review Death of a Wish. I did play it on stream, and I did say that was going to be the next review after Berserk Boy, I believe, but this opportunity sort of came out of nowhere, and considering I had played the first game, I wanted to get this one out on the time of the game's release. Now, I'm going to go back and do Necrosmith 2, and I'm still working on my Parasite Eve review. Because I'm a masochist, apparently, and want to see everything a game has to offer for a retro game review, I am playing through the Chrysler Building. Part of me thinks that was a mistake, but regardless, I am playing through that. Maybe I'll do another stream of that, but we'll see. As for streams for indie games, go over on Twitch. I will be covering the Alone in the Dark. I know it's not necessarily indie right now, but it's sort of in that middle area. But I'm continuing my playthrough of Alone in the Dark, and 2 new games coming up in terms of releases. At least on Thursday, I think it's Pepper Grinder. Friday, I think I will be an old game that I think I wanted to see get more coverage. You can always join the Discord to see what is coming up on the channel. And as always, keep on gaming, but for now, that's it for me. I'm tired. Just like the dead that keep on coming back to life. Maybe somebody can do that to me while I'm sleeping. I'm just gonna ramble to end this review. It doesn't make any sense, I know.